This is a special message that goes out to prospective Side Business Accelerator members who are getting a quick sneak peek on some of the member exclusive content that you have available as a full member of the Side Business Accelerator. So want to invite you specially and enjoy. And if you have any questions about the accelerator, how it works, and anything else that we can help you with, give me an email directly at Aaron, Aaron, at sidebusinessaccelerator.com, and I'd be happy to answer it. Until then, enjoy this free content, this sneak peek. This is one secret of 10 secrets of successful side entrepreneurs. So these are things that separate the run-of-the-mill normal side business entrepreneur from those that are wildly successful, who reach their goals, who for those who have the goal of leaving their full-time job, are able to turn their businesses into full-time ventures. So this is a quick little sneak peek of one of those, and we look forward to seeing you as a full member of the Side Business Accelerator. So enjoy. Okay, so welcome to Part 2 of the 10 Secrets of Successful Side Entrepreneurs. This is Aaron McDaniel. For you Side Business Accelerator members out there, as we just had reviewed the first point, the first secret of successful side entrepreneurs, now we're going to move on to the second one, which is, and this one in particular, of all the 10, this is one of the most important. And it may seem easy, it may not seem like a big deal, but this specific secret will completely change your business, not just right now, but will continue to change your business if you adopt this mindset. So without further ado, secret number 2, which is to get out of the building. First, let me explain a little bit what getting out of the building means. That what happens often when you're running a business is you get so tied into everything about that business, whether it be strategy of where you want to go in the future, dealing with issues related to suppliers, or doing admin things, everything from filing things with the state to doing your own accounting to keeping track of different things to answering emails, and on and on and on. And oftentimes what happens is we get to the point where we sort of hide behind our desk. We hide behind that work. If we go back to secret number 1, one of the things I talked about was that 80-20 rule, and how oftentimes we're spending 80% of our time on things that are only producing 20% of the result. And if we could focus more time on things that are more impactful, it'd be better. And this is probably the most impactful way that you can spend your time. And so getting out of the building, as it says here in the first bullet point, is about going out and talking to customers. It's about asking them questions. It's about understanding what they want. It's about understanding what they like about your product or service, what they don't like, what other things they want, what things in particular they would be willing to pay for. And so getting out there and talking to them is really, really important. And it's also one of the mantras of a very well-respected thought leader, professor in the space. He is the father of the lean movement. I think a lot of people have heard of the lean startup, and we'll talk about that in a number of places in the content for the Side Business Accelerator. But the father of that is a gentleman named Steve Blank, and he wrote 4 Steps to Epiphany, a follow-up book here, as you can see in the picture, the Startup Owner's Manual, which I highly recommend. One of the main processes you go through is what they call the customer discovery process. And that first part of customer discovery is really understanding your customer, understanding their pains, understanding their aspirations, understanding the jobs that they need to have done, so to speak, and being able to address those in your product and services. And so the best way to do that is not to make assumptions, but is to constantly be in contact with your customers. And so the most successful side entrepreneurs set time aside for this. I prescribe that you talk to 5 different customers or prospective customers, people in your target customer base, every single week. Doing that will keep you grounded. It lets you know what they think of your products. It lets you know what they would pay for, what they wouldn't. And so getting out and talking to them is absolutely key. Don't hide behind all this other admin work you have to do. part of the reason why this is also hard when it comes to a side business is because oftentimes you're working, full time. You're working all day, and sometimes it's hard to connect with those customers. And so you got to find the right ways to do that, whether it's about work-life integration and taking time during your day, lunch or a break, to be able to make a call or two, or to do it on nights and weekends and find the right timing to be able to get in front of those customers. It's important. And email is one way to do it. Online surveys are fine, but calling someone up and talking to them, or if they're willing, if they're part of your inner circle, your customer advocacy group, talking to them face to face is incredibly key. So important. Can't overstate how important that is. The other thing that you want to do in the process of getting out of the building is focusing on solving problems. Now, there's an interesting back and forth, and I think because of Steve Jobs, this got a lot more airtime in terms of how to go about creating something. So he famously balked at the idea that you should ask customers what they want. He basically said, customers don't know what they want. I'm going to tell them what they want. And he was able to do that and develop these incredibly innovative solutions in the consumer electronics space. But I would venture to say with most of us who don't have billions of dollars at our disposal, it's much harder to take that stance and say, I know what customers want. It's in my head. I'm going to go do it. And that leads to some bad things, which we'll talk about in a second. And so instead, it's better to think about the problems you can solve or the gains that you can give customers. Now, in every case, while gains are nice, solving problems is always better. Solving problems always is more... People are always more willing to pay to solve problems. And the more serious the problem is, the more people are willing to pay. I mean, if someone's hair is on fire, literally, and you are selling fire extinguishers, they would pay you almost any amount for you to spray that fire extinguisher on them to stop their hair from being on fire, which is much different than having to explain to someone who's not in that situation how there can be a benefit for selling something that will help them later. So focusing on customer pains and solving them is one of the best ways to really measure your product, your solution, or look at the gains that it's providing and measure those and how important those are to specific customers. And the best way to do that is to talk to customers, because you may end up that thing that you thought was a great gain may not be a great gain in the eyes of your customer. There may be something else that they want more, or there may be a pain that you can solve instead. Going out and talking to customers also helps you figure out who the best customer is to talk to. So you may have a great solution to a customer pain, or you may have a great gain to offer someone, but you might not be talking to the right customers. So let's say, for example, you are an organization consultant. You help people get their lives organized, their houses cleaned up, things along those lines. And you've been focusing on people with kids because it's natural. There's a lot of messes that kids have, and it's harder to be organized when you have kids. However, it may be in the mind of that customer, and you talk to them, that it's a total lost cause, that they know that things are going to get messed up because of their kids, and so they're not willing to pay for it because they don't think it's going to be a lasting change. Whereas if you instead focus on either people who don't have any kids, or maybe their kids have graduated from school and moved out of the house, they may be more appropriate because they're more willing to pay for that. They perceive it as a larger problem. So talking to customers, figuring out the pains that we're solving, and figuring out who is the best person who's willing to pay for a solution to those pains or pay for a certain gain you can provide goes a long way in helping your business. And the best way, the primary way to figure that out is to talk to prospective customers. Now, when you're doing that, you don't want to make assumptions. Assumptions can be really, really dangerous because they can lead you to spending a ton of time and a ton of money on the same things. I think a lot of us have heard that kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, what happens when you assume? It makes an ass out of you and me. So you assume that these customers want your product, or they want a certain feature in your products, or they want a certain pricing plan. And if you're basing that just off of what you think would be good, because maybe you are providing a solution for a problem you have, that can be very dangerous because you may not be exactly the same as a lot of others in your target customer base. And so you never want to assume. As an example, I had started a mobile app company that was actually a little bit before Uber came out. It was, and my company was a taxi app called Flag Down Taxi. And instead of focusing on the drivers like Lyft and Uber did, we were focused on working with taxi companies. And we had to think through the process that a dispatcher went through when someone would request a taxi, and then putting it into their system that would then automatically send a taxi out to go pick that person up. And we assumed that they would easily be able to access email, or we'd easily be able to feed the data for that passenger and where they wanted to go get picked up. And we assumed it would be super easy for them to change their process, either feed it into their backend system or look at that email. And we ended up being very wrong. And the taxi companies were very much against that change of something we thought was really easy to do, but ended up being a big hurdle for us to get over. And not as many taxi companies wanted to sign up because they thought it was hard. We assumed it would be easy, and it just wasn't in the mind of them. And as we talked to more of the customers, we learned that that wasn't right, and we had to come up with a new solution that was better, which then led to better results afterwards. And then finally, the last piece is about asking the right questions. So it's not just about asking questions, but asking them properly. So when talking to customers, there are such things as good and bad questions. What you do not, I repeat, you do not want to do is ask them questions about what they think about certain features about your product, because oftentimes they'll be nice, maybe they won't tell exactly the truth about things. If you pose it in a what if scenario, it's much better to ask them about their experience in something outside of your product. So for example, let's say you are creating a new e-reader to compete against Kindle. What you don't want to do is say, hey, what do you think of a new feature that allows you to more easily flip through pages and take notes better than Kindle does? Would you like that? That leads the prospective customer to not necessarily answer maybe in the most honest way, or you're narrowing the scope of the type of answer they could give because it has to be either an I like or don't like this type of feature. Instead, you want to ask more broadly. So you first confirm, do you use an e-reader? Well, what e-reader do you use? Why do you like it? Why don't you? If you could make the experience with your e-reader better, how would you change it? And then you don't want to necessarily be swayed by one person saying something. So if, for example, that person says, they say, well, one thing that's missing is the ability to flip through pages faster. I would like that better if my e-reader did that. And you don't want to just make an assumption because one customer said that's the answer. Instead, you want to collect that information, be almost like an unbiased scientist, and collect that. And if you hear something a few times from multiple people, then you know it's something worth considering. So you're letting them tell you what's best. Instead of saying, what pricing model do you think? This, or this? You ask, how would you like to pay for this? How much would you be willing to pay for this? And that will help you much better understand how to reach that customer, how to price things properly, how to make the right features and functionalities for your products and services. And so it's about getting out there and not necessarily, which is often easy for us to do, start spewing out, check it out, what do you think of all these great things about the product and everything that I built, and here's why you need it, and you're going into sales mode. Instead, you want to take a step back, ask those questions to understand how they think, to see what they want, so that you can deliver it to them. Because if you go out and talk to 5 customers a week, you're going to start seeing, or 5 prospective customers a week, you're going to start seeing similar topics being brought up multiple times. And those things that are brought up a lot, are more common amongst your prospective customers. You can also understand as you talk to multiple customers which ones you want to work with more, which ones may be more profitable, which ones won't take as much effort, and then focus on tailoring your product or service or pricing or marketing messages to that group that would optimize and be most profitable for you. So once again, to take a step back, secret number 2 is to get out of the building. Don't get stuck behind all of the administrative tasks and other things you have to get done on a regular basis. Otherwise, there will be no time for you to get out there and talk to your customers, understand what they like, see how you can make things better, uncover new opportunities. And when you're talking to them, make sure that you're not making assumptions. You're not assuming that this is what a customer wants. You're actually using that time not to tell customers that they're wrong because they think differently than you, but instead to listen, to understand what that customer wants. And you'll start seeing patterns, again, as we talked about, of certain types of customers liking your products and services more, or maybe a feature or something to change about your product that would make it better, that would be more interesting to your target customer base. So focus on solving those problems, focus on giving those customer gains as opposed to selling a product. And at the very least, when you focus on understanding what a customer's problems are, even if you don't change your product, you're going to understand the right marketing message to tell them so that they will be interested in taking a look at your product or service because they see it as something that solves that problem or gives them a pleasure or a gain of something they really want. And then finally, when you're asking questions, ask the right questions. Don't ask them what they think specifically about things that you think are right, but ask them more about the problems they face, more about how they would potentially use a product like yours, speaking more generally, so you can understand things and allow the conversation to go down a path instead of being too strict and focusing on only things that you want to understand and going through a checklist of features and functionality that you want. So make sure to talk to customers often. Again, I recommend 5 times a week, 5 different customers. And that doesn't mean every single week it has to be 5 separate people. Sometimes those best people to go back to are the ones that are most engaged. And the thing that's probably the best part of all of this, except for the changes it's going to have on your business, is the fact that when you listen to these problems and you go solve them, you change your product, you adapt your service to be something that is more in line with what that customer wants. Those customers you talk to are going to be more loyal. They're going to see that you're making an effort to help them, and they're going to be much more willing not only to continue to use your product and service, but to tell their other friends about it. And that will lead to more loyal customers as well as an expanded customer base just from you going through this exercise. So thank you again for part 2, getting out of the building. Now we're going to go on and talk about secret number 3.